This is every change in Monsters of the Multiverse. Do you like patch notes? I do. Patches are one of the best ways to keep a game fresh after you've been playing the same thing for years and years, but do they work in D&D? Monsters of the Multiverse has reprinted 33 races from Volos, Mordenkainens, and a bunch of other sourcebooks, giving many of them fresh coats of paint, rewritten features, big buffs and nerfs, and an overall more unified, balanced philosophy. Think of it like a big patch to a tabletop RPG. It's a long watch, but feel free to skip around as you please. Timestamps for every race are in the description below. If you've watched a live stream of this, thanks for tuning in. This is basically the same thing, but with much less tea breaks. Without further ado, let's begin. Before we get ahead of ourselves, I want to discuss the core philosophies going into this book. The races included spanned many years of publications and had to be rebalanced and retuned not only against each other, but also all the content in the years to come. The design direction of these races will almost definitely match up with the changes they'll make in the new Player's Handbook releasing in 2024. And some of you will prefer the old versions, and that's totally fine. These new prints don't erase the old ones at your table if you don't want them to. Just know that this new standard is what all future releases will look like. So you ask, what are these changes? We'll start with this. The Tasha's format. First seen in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything back in 2020, we were introduced to custom origins and custom lineages, ways to modify existing races for newer settings or divergent backstories, or create entirely new races as you so desired. These optional rules have been the core paradigm for the foundations of all releases since. Every release in 2021 have followed these rules and fit cleanly into the new standard. First are modular ASI, 3 points to spread between 2 stats or 3. Every race released after 2020 have had no static ASI spreads, and all the races in this book are no different. Unchanging, predetermined ASI are a thing of the past, to avoid boxing races into certain classes, builds, and dispositions. The Kobold's the only race in this book that gets a strict buff from this, previously having only 2 ASI sitting in decks. But many races will greatly benefit in terms of flexibility and variance, being able to take on new build paths without giving up optimization. The majority of races also no longer have expected heights, weights, or lifespan lengths. Some races are explicitly long-lived in their flavor texts, like elves, dwarves, and firbolgs, but the rest live for about a century unless your DM says otherwise. This is again made for the purpose of setting agnosticism, that you might be able to slot them into your homebrew settings looking like however you want. Tall orcs and short dwarves are no longer mandated mechanically to be that height by the stat block. Finally, all races have been standardized to 2 languages, common plus 1 more. We assume the +1 is from your character's upbringing, which allows flexibility if, say, your dwarf didn't grow up with dwarves or your goblin with goblins. This is a nerf to some races that have had 3 languages at base. In this book alone, the Aarakocra, Changeling, Deep Gnome, Duergar, Githyanki, and Yuan-Ti have lost 1 language each. This is a buff to just one race, the Shifter, who has only ever had 1 language. Now, a lot of people don't like the Tasha's format, preferring to tap into the deep lore that races are usually packaged with. And I don't blame them. I think knowing all that lore in the background makes it more fun to subvert those expectations. Just know that the races in this book, as well as every race in 2021 and for the indefinite future, will be written just like this, that they may be as setting agnostic as possible, as well as enabling full freedom of build paths. Next up is race categories, also known as the abolishment of subraces. As of this book, and well, Fizbin's before it, subraces will no longer be printed as we know them. Their unique features will either be integrated into the base race as a singular yet notable list of choices, or they will be printed as a separate race entirely. Aasimar and Shifters, for example, have all been mushed together into their one parent race. The differences between Fallen, Scourge, and Protector Aasimar have been compressed into a singular modular race trait called Celestial Revelation, which we'll go over in a minute. Similarly, the Shifter subraces have been squished into a singular race trait called Shifting. On the flip side, Elves and Genasi have each individually been split into their own races. This is what happens when the differences between each subrace are too numerous to fit cleanly into one race trait. Eladrin, Shadar-Kai, and Sea Elves are all now individual races, and each Genasi has split up as well. Other elves like Drow, High Elves, and Wood Elves aren't in this book, but when they are eventually revised, they'll almost definitely have these changes as well. To make sure feats still work with these former subraces, there are now creature tags, race traits within the stat block that dictate what these races are classified as, and therefore be still valid candidates for certain feats like Gnome Cunning and Elven Accuracy. Duergar are dwarves, Deep Gnomes are gnomes, Bugbears, goblins, and hobgoblins are newly branded as goblinoids, something that used to be only attached to their bestiary counterparts. Eladrin, Sea Elf, and Shadar-Kai are of course elves, and Changelings are newly branded as Fae. Moving on, spellcasting. First seen in the Tasha's feats and later in the Fairy of 2021, innate spells have been greatly improved to be flexible with any of the 3 mental stats of your choice: intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. This allows races to be any caster class they want, and still have the spells they're born with scale properly as they level. A fantastic change given to Aarakocra, Deep Gnomes, Duergar, Eladrin, Firbolgs, all Genasi, Githyanki, Githzerai, Kobolds, Triton, and Yuan-Ti. Genasi are uniquely affected. They were the only race to have spells scale off of Constitution, but now they scale with Int, Wiz, or Ka as desired. Not to be understated, now you can use your spell slots to cast your racial spells, getting way more mileage out of them. Alright, let's talk about speeds and sizes. Fun changes. Movement speeds have been changed in 2 important ways. Firstly, no speeds of any kind are below 30 feet. All small races in this book, and likely the rest of them forever, will no longer have 25 feet move speed. They've been boosted to 30 feet. Why? Simple. 25 feet is boring and feels bad. That's it. Aarakocra will now have their walk speed bumped to 30 feet, and Tabaxi have their climb speed bumped up to match their walking speed. Speaking of, all secondary move speeds that swim, climb, and fly now match the race's walking speed. If your walk speed increases as you level, so does everything else. This means the almighty Aarakocra, D&D's famous flying fighter jet, has had their wings clipped, reducing the absurd 50 feet fly speed to match their walk speed. The water Genasi, Lizardfolk, Sea Elf, and Triton all now have matching walk and swim speeds. The bird gets the short end of the stick, which was, in my opinion, a long time coming. Another new change first introduced by the Gothic lineages, but now available to fan favorites. Some races can optionally now be small. Bestial races like the Harengon, Kenku, Tortle, and the Yuan-Ti make sense, as their animal counterparts are usually pretty small. Plain-touched races like Aasimar and Genasi can, in theory, be born of any race, even small ones, so it makes sense to allow that scope and size. Probably one of the more fun changes on this list. But let's get a little more specific. Big nerf to magic resistance and Gnome cunning, famously strong abilities that grant advantage on saving throws against all magical effects. They've been nerfed to only affect spells. This nerf, coupled with many monsters in this book carrying less spells overall, means that the Satyr, Yuan-Ti, and Gnomes will be getting much less mileage out of this race trait. Next one is a buff. Sunlight sensitivity, quite possibly the worst bane to exist among all race traits, has been omitted from both races in this book that used to have it. WotC has been making an effort to remove all negative or punishing traits from race stat blocks, from negative ASI to 25 feet move speed, and now this. Both races, the Duergar and the Kobold, have been heavily rebalanced in kind to maybe offset the bonuses they got in exchange. Is this a permanent change moving forward? Will the Drow from the PHB eventually meet the same fate? Can't be sure, but it's looking like it. Next, let's talk about proficiency bonuses, or PB for short. Anyone who's read the subclasses of Tasha's knows that almost all charge systems in 5e have moved towards using PB as their metric of choice. All abilities in this book that used to scale with level now scale with PB. That includes the Aasimar's Healing Hands and Celestial Revelation, the Goblin's Fury of the Small, and the Shifter's Shifting. Additionally, every single ability that used to recover on a short rest now gets an amount of uses equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. I can't emphasize this enough. Among the races in this book, there are no more abilities that recharge on a short rest. The biggest advantage to this is that now you can use the abilities multiple times in one combat. By level 5, you can use any of these abilities down here 3 times in the same fight, which can be really, really strong. I think it's a healthy change. There's a lot of tables out there that don't really utilize short rests, even less so more than 2 short rests in a traveling day. On average, every race will get more mileage out of these than they would have previously. Next big changes, strikes and weapons. All races with natural weapons have been buffed. Their 1d4 unarmed strikes have been improved to 1d6. That said, the race traits no longer use the words natural weapons, clearing up the confusion between proper weapons and unarmed strikes. Anything that applies to unarmed strikes applies to these. On the topic of weapons, many races have lost them, with a move toward setting agnosticism and purely biological race traits. Many features that imply some sort of learned upbringing have been wiped from the stat block. This includes training in weapons and armor. Unless your weapon skills were divined upon you by your past lives or outer space itself, you no longer gain armor or weapon proficiencies from your race alone. This change probably signals that many of these proficiencies will be moved towards backgrounds and early level feats, as we've seen in some Unearthed Arcana. But as of this book, it hasn't happened yet. Githyanki and elves are some of the few that keep their weapon talents, dividing them from an otherworldly presence. Speaking on elves, we gotta remember the number 1 rule of elves in D&D 5e. Elves are never nerfed. As the favorite children of the cosmos, we have universal elf changes, which apply to the Eladrin, Sea Elf, and Shadar-Kai, but will more than likely apply to every elf from here on out. Firstly, the elf creature tag is added as a race trait, because, as we've said, sub-races no longer exist, and we need a way to make sure they still qualify for elven feats. Fey ancestry has been improved. Previously, as worded, you'd only have advantage on the initial saving throw against a charmed condition, but not the repeating saves that come after in case you fail the first one. It's been buffed to include all saves against a charmed condition as a whole. Now the next change is interesting. The immunity to sleep, previously attached to Fey ancestry, has been moved to trance. This is because the Fey ancestry feature has been given to a bunch of other races, notably goblins, hobgoblins, and bugbears, and since they have no reason to be immune to sleep, it's been bumped to trance to stay as a uniquely elven thing. This also means that half-elves, while not in this book, will also lose immunity to sleep whenever they get revised, because they also have Fey ancestry. Something to look out for. Trance itself has changed. For one, the wording has changed a bit to solidify that yes, their long rests finish in 4 hours. Back in 2015, there was a sage advice ruling that said elven long rests were intended to still be 8 hours, even if they only had the trance for 4 of those 8. That was super confusing, and nowadays WotC has walked it back and allowed trances to finish in 4 hours. Finally, elves can learn in their trance. After a long rest, elves can wake up with proficiency in one weapon or tool of their choice, and hold on to it until their next long rest. Canonically, in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, elves glean the memories of their past lives during trance, allowing them to learn from previous iterations of themselves. Flavorful and mechanically great. Another thing to add to the pile of elven perks. Anyway, with all the boring stuff out of the way, let's finally get into the specifics. Again, timestamps down below, skip around as much as you want, bounce around as you so wish. Aarakocra. Now we've kind of already gone through all of its changes. The fastest race in D&D is no more, with its fly speed cut to 30 feet, matching its new walking speed. They also lose a language, previously knowing 3, and are down to 2. The talons are a little bit stronger from 1d4 to 1d6, and Aarakocra now have a new spellcasting feature, getting Gust of Wind as an innate race spell. As a whole, this is a huge nerf to the birdfolk, deleting their notorious talent as the flying speedster, putting them in line with the fairy, the owlin, and the winged tiefling. I think this change was a long time coming. I've always thought the most broken part of Aarakocra was not the flight, but the 50 feet of flight. Moving so quick it was basically uninteractable from a DM standpoint, at least until level 5. This is a healthy change, and for the Aarakocra enthusiasts out there, probably not their favorite one. Aasimar, big changes here too, or small changes. They can be small now, little baby angels like cherubs. Healing Hands gets a buff, growing to 1d4 times proficiency bonus amounts of healing. A little more random, but on average more than before. The biggest change is Celestial Revelation, which replaces the 3 Aasimar sub-races. This is your trademark transformation, split into the classic 3 options, Fallen, Scourge, and Protector. Transforming is now a bonus action, which is a huge buff, meaning you could still attack or cast the big spells on the same turn. The bonus every turn damage on the flip side was heavily nerfed, now equal to your proficiency bonus instead of your level. Now transforming is much less clunky mid-combat in exchange for dealing less damage the longer the fight goes on. Last small changes, Protector's flight speed now matches your walking speed, and Scourge's self-damage is no longer self-damaging. Healthy changes, I think, mostly buffs in everything except damage output. Interesting note, they totally missed their opportunity to rename Radiant Soul to something else, a feature name already found in the Celestial Warlock, which is a pretty common race class combo. Next is Bugbears. Alright, this is a big one. Simple stuff first. The Goblinoid creature tag groups it with goblins and hobgoblins. The trio all get Fey ancestry, pretty useful at all levels. Weird new ability added to Sneaky. In addition, without squeezing, you can move through and stop in a place large enough for a small creature. Now, mechanically that doesn't change much. After all, small and medium creatures both occupy the same 5x5 space without squeezing. But intuitively, and I know you can imagine this, all small races are a maximum of 4 feet tall. So bugbears somehow can squish themselves down to that height with no issues at all. I don't know if that's some ancient bugbear lore I've never heard about, but it kinda looks goofy. Anyway, the most important change was made to surprise attack. Previously, you'd get this 2d6 bump in damage if you hit a surprised creature on your first turn. Somewhere along the way, WotC realized getting surprise is really hard and changed it to this. If you hit a creature with an attack roll and it hasn't taken a turn yet in the current combat, you get a 2d6 damage bonus. On top of that, they removed the line that says you can only use it once per combat, which means you can trigger it more than once, as long as you attack more than once. So, extra attack, flurry of blows, scorching ray, each attack gets an additional 2d6 on top of it. This is one of those racial features that's really fun to build around. Suddenly, the alert feat is pretty good. Barbarian's advantage on initiative means your first 2 swings hit really hard. It's a notable buff to Bugbear that opens the floor to some really interesting builds, and I don't think it's broken. Even with 2 attacks, the damage is about equal to a base level Guiding Bolt, once per combat. But overall, nothing but buffs for the Bugbear. And it still has its reach, so I'm sure it'll see a lot more play from here on out. In contrast, Centaur's got not much at all really. Increased hoof damage and 1 renamed ability that didn't mechanically change at all. To its credit, after the demotion of the Aarakocra, the Centaur claims the throne of the fastest race in D&D at 40-foot walk speed. Some fun changes to the Changeling. They're considered fey creatures now, which means spells like Hold and Charm Person no longer work on them. Changelings can be small, and uniquely they can swap between medium and small at will as an action. Now, due to very minor wording changes, the ability to change your weight has been removed, which, the more I think about it, the more it makes sense, I think. Not sure if it was intentional, but that's how it is now. They have lost a language thanks to the Tasha's format, and Changeling Instincts now adds performance to the list of skill proficiencies you could possibly pick up. More than anything, it's a versatility buff for Changelings, not so much a power bump, most of which is very welcome. Alright, back to big changes. The Deep Gnome is the only gnome in this book, which means the base gnome and all of its other subraces are untouched for now. We do get a couple of insights about what will eventually change about them by extrapolation. Move speed 30 for starters, a new creature tag that ensures gnome feats still work on them, and the nerf to gnomish magic resistance that prevents it from affecting non-spell magic effects. Superior Dark Vision's been renamed to just Dark Vision with no mechanical changes. Weird. Stone Camouflage has been renamed and made much more useful in exchange for having limited uses. It works even if you're not among rocky terrain, giving you advantage on that stealth check a number of times equal to your PB per long rest. I think this is a healthy change, and I can't imagine having to roll stealth more than 3 to 5 times a day anyway. Totally new feature in Gift of the Surfneblin. A free casting of Disguise Self and non-detection, really leaning into that illusory magic. Not game-breaking, but still useful every now and then. Non-detection is one of those spells that you'd never pick up yourself, but good to have handy if it's free. Finally, the Deep Gnome loses a language, dropping from 3 languages to 2. Now, here's some real meat to chew on. Big changes to the Duergar dwarf, and by extension, every other dwarf eventually. The dwarf is the hardest hit by the new biology-focused stat blocks of races, losing a great many cultural traits. Dwarven combat training, stone cunning, and tool proficiency are all entirely removed, and also the line that says your speed is not reduced by wearing heavy armor is entirely gone as well. These changes will likely occur to all dwarves released from here on out, which begs the question what they'll get in exchange. It's not all bad though. 25 feet move speed bumped to 30, a dwarf creature tag to keep dwarven feats, and a loss of sunlight sensitivity, letting Duergar fight normally above ground, which is huge. They do lose their 3rd language, forcing them to choose between Dwarvish and Undercommon, and Superior Dark Vision was renamed with no changes. Dwarven Resilience got a small but notable change. They keep their poison resistance, but their advantage against poison in general has been reworded and minorly nerfed, only affecting saving throws against the poisoned condition, and not poison in general. It used to also help on saving throws against straight poison damage, like the bite of a poisonous snake. Psionic Fortitude has taken a lot of the old benefits of the original Duergar's resilience. Advantage on saving throws against a charmed condition stays, minorly buffed by affecting repeated charm saves, and newly helps against the stunned condition. It used to affect the paralyzed condition as well as against illusions, which are both entirely gone. Finally, small changes to the Duergar magic feature. You can now use the reduce half of the free self-cast Enlarge Reduce spell, and you can use both Enlarge Reduce and Invisibility while in direct sunlight, which was previously impossible. These are both still fantastic spells, and at the end of the day, Duergar keep plenty of their great talents. Resistance to poison, advantage against poisoned, charmed, and stunned. Their biggest weakness, sunlight sensitivity, has been entirely erased. Dwarves have always been fantastically strong, but unlike the untouchable elves, they've taken some of the biggest nerfs in the entire book. Probably the biggest case study as to the impact of these sweeping changes. Speaking of elves, here's the Eladrin. It's got all the changes we mentioned before, Fey Ancestry and Trance changes, buffs to fighting the charmed condition, and it's not a subrace anymore, it's its own race with the elf creature tag. Their face step has quietly improved. It can be used PB times per long rest, meaning you can use the improved Misty Step multiple times in one fight. The DC of its saving throw, if it has one, uses your choice of any of your mental stats. Finally, Summer Eladrin's Phase Step fire damage scales off of proficiency bonus instead of charisma modifier, which is a nerf to charisma casters and a buff for everyone else. The Fairy, no changes. The Fairy released in Wild Beyond the Witchlight in 2021. already fitting the mold that the rest of these races were made with. Since the nerf of Aarakocra, the fairies have been able to climb up the charts as one of the premier flying races. The Firbolg's got some small changes. Firbolg magic is buffed like the rest, and is kinda funny. If you recall, the disguised self of a Firbolg can grow or shrink them up to 3 feet taller or shorter. Because the Firbolg stat block no longer has a defined height, you could make your Firbolg 5 feet tall normally, and able to shrink down to 2 feet tall. Does that have any mechanical advantages? Not at all, but it's pretty silly to think about. Moving on, Hidden Step, the feature that turns you invisible, has PB per long rest uses. Speech of Beast and Leaf has another silly change. They newly specify that you can speak to vegetation. Previously, you could only speak technically to beasts and plants, but unfortunately the latter already has an attached meaning towards creatures of the plant subtype. They've capitalized beast and plant for clarity's sake and added vegetation, just in case you weren't sure. Chop off one language for the Tasha attacks, and that's your new Firbolg. Alright, let's get into my favorite race in D&D, the Genasi. All 4 Genasi are now independent races, and their famously underpowered stat blocks have been blessed with a much needed buff. Air Genasi, as well as all Genasi, can now be small. Remember that a Genasi is a plain-touched being, and can be born of any race, small races notwithstanding. Anyway, the buffs. Walking speed, +5. Dark vision, 60 feet. Lightning resistance, stack it on. 2 new spells in Shocking Grasp at 1st level, and Featherfall at 3rd. The only minor nerf is that Levitate has moved down from 1st to 5th level, which is only a minor inconvenience. Everything else, huge bonuses. Earth Genasi. All Genasi now have Dark Vision 60 feet. Earth Walk now works on any surface you can walk on, not just earth and stone, ignoring a great deal of difficult terrain. You also get Blade Ward as a cantrip, which is normally terrible, but a few times a day you can cast it as a bonus action, granting you bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing resistance without costing your action. With all this, I really do think Earth Genasi will get their time in the sun, especially because they still have Pass Without Trace for free, a fantastic spell usually limited to rangers and druids. Another big win for the Genasi. The Fire Genasi received the least changes. An odd change to their dark vision was made. The flavor that let them see dark vision in shades of red has been removed. They also get a new spell at 5th level, Flame Blade, which is historically a bit underwhelming. Fire Genasi have always been the strongest of the 4, with Intelligence and Constitution being fantastic stats for wizards and artificers. But now with flexible ability scores, we'll get to see them spread their wings a bit. Finally, the Water Genasi has received its small bundle of buffs. Small size optional, swim speed now scaling with walk speed, and the dark vision they deserve. They've lost the spell Shape Water in favor of Acid Splash, which honestly I'm not the biggest fan of, though I'm pretty sure it's because Shape Water came from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and they want all racial spells to come from the player's handbook. You get one more new spell in Water Walk, helping your less aquatic friends traverse the open seas. Moving on to Githyanki. Famously the premier wizard Gish, the Githyanki might now need to diversify. They've lost quite a bit, losing 1 language, 2 language proficiencies, and all armor proficiencies. What they've lost in durability, they've gained in flexibility. Decadent Mastery has been replaced with Astral Knowledge, gaining you 1 skill proficiency of your choice, and 1 weapon or tool of your choice. Anything you've gained from Astral Knowledge can be swapped out for something else, every long rest, much like the new Elven Trance. This lets you use different weapons other than the 3 swords provided, letting you maybe even adapt to magic items you pick up along the way. Here's a slide to make sense of the changes. Githyanki have almost always been chosen for their free armor, weapons, and +1 intelligence, and it'd be hard to replicate the same build without something like a 1-level dip in fighter, or some new background they'll cook up in the future. Oh, and they're now resistant to psychic. Pretty useful. The Githzerai have much simpler changes, almost entirely buffs. Mental Disciple has been improved to work on repeating Charmed and Frightened saving throws, and they've also gained resistance to psychic. A huge buff is the ability to use spell slots for innate spells, because they learn Shield at level 3, which is in the running for the best 1st level spell in the game. Really fantastic defensive features on the Githzerai in particular. The Goblin, famous little rascals, just like the Bugbear, they get Fey Ancestry and a Goblinoid creature tag, which makes me think there might be Goblin feats in the future. Fury of the Small's been both buffed and nerfed. With PB per long rest uses, you can trigger it more than once per combat, but the damage has been steeply nerfed from your level amount of damage to your proficiency bonus. I made a table to visualize it. This shows the amount of damage you'll put out over the course of a day, depending on how many short rests you get. The output is almost unanimously higher on the old version with just 1 short rest, but with the new Goblin you have the potential to output all that damage in 1 fight, and split it across different targets. The old one was much better at breaking enemy concentration with high single attack damage numbers, and in my opinion, much more satisfying to look at. The Goliath is one of my favorite races and has barely any changes, but is massively improved. Let's cover the small stuff first. Natural athlete and powerful build were combined into one trait called Little Giant. Mountain-born now says you do just fine in high altitudes, even if you didn't grow up there. Now the little but big change is in Stone's Endurance. Instead of recharging once per short rest, you can use it a number of times equal to PB per long rest. Remember, Stone's Endurance reduces an attack by 1d12 plus con, which has always been amazing. With just plus 2 con, at level 5 you can reduce an average of 25.5 damage in the most important fight of the day. It's almost like having 25 free temp HP in your back pocket. With ability scores now being modular, Goliath are no longer locked into strength builds. Your softy wizard or sorcerer can add an invisible chunk of HP to their pools with this one race trait. I don't think a lot of people will agree with me on this, but I think Goliath are a quiet frontrunner choice in modern day spellcasters looking to soak some extra damage. Harengon, no changes. Again, they came out in 2021 with the fairy already fitted to these new age design philosophies. Play them as you will. Hobgoblins got a pretty hefty rewrite, known most famously as the militaristic disciplined goblinoids. By removing all the learned and cultural race traits, the hobgoblins have been newly focused into Fey origins. The goblinoid tag and Fey ancestry speak of this lineage, and martial training has been removed, much like what happened to the Githyanki. Saving face, relating to their pride and composure among their military corps, has been rebranded into Fortune from the Many, with a slight bump down to its maximum possible bonus, and once again the short rest recharge replaced with PB per long rest. They have an entirely new ability called Fey Gift, which lets them use the help action as a bonus action a handful amount of times. In addition, you can choose between one of 3 bonuses to bless your ally with or curse your enemy. It's a neat little maneuver that harkens back to the Hobgoblin's talent in teamwork, although no longer rooted in their army experience. I see all of this as a whole as a hefty nerf to casters looking for an armored option, but an overall buff to everyone else looking to play this race for other reasons. Kenku have gotten a pretty unique overhaul. This is one of the few races where the flavor text makes a noteworthy change to their playstyle. Kenku are now allowed to talk without mimicry. For better or worse, gone are the days when Kenku were forced to only have the vocabulary of their peers. Instead, they're simply talented copycats, keeping their impeccable knack of perfectly duplicating voices, paperwork, and craftsmanship. Another important flavor change is the renaming of expert forgery to expert duplication, avoiding the negative connotations the former might imply. Mechanically, they can also now copy their own work confoundingly well. Kenku Training is replaced by Kenku Recall, letting you pick any 2 skills of your choice, and having advantage on any skill checks you're proficient with a handful amount of times per day. Besides now having a bite-sized option, the final change is the addition of a DC to your mimicry trait, previously being a contested roll. All in all, a solid stat block if you're looking to be a skill monkey for your party without investing levels into rogue. Now, the Kobold might be the star of this show, the one race that has truly divided the D&D community in its changes. Kobolds have a famously unique and quirky set of race traits, most of which have been smoothed out to fit the new formula. From the top, they get +1 ASI, upgrading from 2 to 3. Their signature pack tactics has been entirely removed, as well as their sunlight sensitivity, joining the Duergar in the morning sun. Grovel, Cower, and Beg has been reworked into Draconic Cry, removing the cowardly connotation to something more heroic, or depending on your interpretation of Cry, just as pitiful. It's definitely been buffed, that's for sure. It's now a bonus action instead of an action, letting you attack on the same turn, but ends at the start of your next turn instead of the end of your next turn. It has charges equal to your PB per long rest, letting you gain AoE advantage multiple times in one fight. There's a nuanced change here in the wording. Grovel used to function like an aura, affecting anyone standing within 10 feet of you until the end of your next turn. Draconic Cry instead acts like a fleeting hex, marking any enemies that were within 10 feet of you at time of cast, and remaining with them regardless of how far they move away from you. Both have their perks, but personally I much prefer the revision. Kobold Legacy is an entirely new race trait, and probably would have been a sub-race if it was printed a few years ago. You get to choose a unique talent tied to your draconic bloodline. Craftiness gives you 1 proficiency from a list of 5, Defiance gives you advantage against a frightened condition, and Draconic Sorcery gives you 1 sorcerer cantrip of your choice, flexible to whatever casting stat you prefer. Of course, even with all these changes, Pack Tactics purists might still refuse to play this new Kobold, preferring the tactical balancing act that the old version provided, and enjoying the challenge of making that work. For everyone else, I'd say this Kobold is a solid alternative, strong in its unique talents, and will likely fit into any campaign setting without much issue. On a simpler note, the Lizardfolk has some modest changes. A swim speed equal to walk speed, and bite now deals slashing damage, which is honestly really strange to me and doesn't have any precedent. Hungry Jaws is minorly buffed, can be used multiple times in one fight, and I'd say heals a little bit more on average. Hunter's Lore has been renamed to Nature's Intuition, with medicine added to the list of choices, dodging the presupposition that all lizardfolk are hunters by nature. Biggest proof of this is the removal of Cunning Artisan, the lizardfolk's trademark ability to craft weapons from the remains of their enemies. I'm gonna be honest, without it, the lizardfolk stat block is kind of boring. I get that it was removed in the process of removing cultural aspects from biological stat blocks, but until backgrounds are improved to fill that wild hunter aesthetic, lizardfolk don't inspire a great deal of storytelling in my honest opinion. The Minotaur have some very minor changes in transition from their Magic the Gathering stat blocks. Gone is Intimidating Presence, losing their one skill proficiency in Intimidation or Persuasion. Replacing it is an ability more similar to one from their bestiary stat block, Labyrinthine Recall, which gives them an innate uncanny sense of direction in even the strangest of mazes. Apparently, being a living compass is something you're born with rather than learned. The final change is a simple word swap in Hammering Horns, which used to say shove in reference to their 10-foot push. Understandably, that's easily confused with the universal action shove, which can't push people 10 feet. So it was replaced with the word push, which is a smart call in my book. It's crazy how much some unassuming words like these can have so much meaning between the lines. Now we're on Orcs, onto another revision following their Eberron release and multiple errata. They've removed the Primal Intuition feature, which is odd to me because by its name it seems like something they'd be born with. Instead, they've been given Relentless Endurance, previously famously unique to half-orcs. It's a great feature, but now it makes me wonder what half-orcs will get in response to further differentiate them from their full-blooded relatives. Anyway, notable changes to Aggressive, rebranded to Adrenaline Rush. Remember what we said about words with meanings? The bonus action movement towards an enemy has been formalized to a bonus action dash, meaning now you can move in any direction you want. On top of that, you get extra temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. Unfortunately, with buffs come nerfs, its previously infinite uses have been cut down to, you guessed it, proficiency bonus uses per long rest. The Orc's been the poster child of modern age rebranding for years, trying to shed the decades of history as the brutish, blood-hungry raiders. If the goal is to reintroduce Orcs into new settings as a people that can be otherwise, I'd say these are steps in the right direction. The Satyr's gotten some small changes, mostly covered in the intro. Ram damage boosted to 1d6, and magic resistance nerfed to only work on spells. I thought it was crazy when Satyr came out that they shared the infamous magic resistance trait with Yuan-Ti, an ability that I believe has been rightfully nerfed. Otherwise, still a fantastic choice. The Sea Elves got a surprising amount of changes, most of which we've already covered. Swim speed equal to walk speed, 3 languages cut down to a module or 2, and the Universal Elf changes to Fey Ancestry and Trance. Sea Elf training is gone, no longer do they gain an automatic proficiency in naval weapons. In exchange, Child of the Sea grants them a new cold resistance, putting them in good company with the Goliath. Finally, a unique nerf to Friend of the Sea that clarifies that the beasts you can talk to can understand you, but you still can't understand them by default. The last elf in the book is the Shadar-Kai. Outside of the Universal Elf changes, they've got a singular mechanical change, but it's a really good one. Blessing of the Raven Queen, the ability that lets you teleport 30 feet and gain resistance to all damage for an entire round, can now be used more than once per day. Even better, more than once per combat. Huge buff in resilience if you're the enemy's target of choice, having all damage to yourself for potentially 3 whole rounds by level 5. On the flavor side, they've lost the line that says they're devoid of emotion, allowing a little more flexibility in roleplaying. In exchange, they've got a weird line that says while they're into Shadowfell, they also become wizened. I just learned that wizened doesn't mean wiser, it means wrinkly. They get wrinkly like old people in the Shadowfell. No idea if there's a precedent for that, but if you're unusually attuned to Shadar-Kai lore, let me know if that's been around in the comments below. The Shifter and all of their subraces have been compressed into a singular stat block. The 4 subraces of Shifter, Beasthide, Longtooth, Swiftstride, and Wildhunt, used to each have their own ASI, a unique skill proficiency, and 1 bonus they'd get when they shift into their bestial form. Well, the ASI are obviously gone. The 4 shifting features have been compressed into a singular race trait, of which you can choose which one you want. And now you get to choose one of the 4 skill proficiencies provided by the subraces, independent of your chosen shifting feature, now called Bestial Instincts. Now you can mix and match the skill proficiency and the shifting feature to whatever combo you think best fits your character aesthetic. The temporary HP you get while shifting has been rebalanced to equal double your proficiency bonus, which is a little bit worse on average. It does let you transform more than once a short rest now, but since the ability lasts for a minute, it's unlikely you'll need it twice in the same combat. The only change to the independent subraces is a small buff to Longtooth, which lets you attack the same turn you shift, which is nice. Finally, they've got a buff in gaining one more language. They were the only race in this book that only ever had access to just Common. Tabaxi. Very small changes but buffs across the board. Small cats, get them at a D&D table near you. Climb speed matching your walk speed, which is crazy if you remember how Tabaxi can double their speed every other turn. And claw damage bumped to 1d6. All good things, all good things. And turtles, surprisingly similar changes. Small turtles, now a thing too. Turtle claws, also d6. A small change to natural armor. To use it, you can't be wearing any armor at all. Before, you could wear armor and choose which AC calculation you wanted to use between that and your shell. A slight inconvenience, especially if you wear armor for its magical bonuses. Survival instinct has been expanded beyond just survival, adding 5 more options to choose from. Whether you want to be a sagely turtle, or a healing turtle, or a ninja turtle, it's entirely up to you. On to Triton. Not to be confused with the sea elf or the water genasi, have a lot of the same changes. Swim speed now equal to walk speed, and wall of water replaced with water walk. Again, I don't think this was a balancing choice as much as it was removing a spell that could only be found in Xanathars. Wall of water is way more interesting as an innate spell in my own humble opinion. Emissary of the Sea has been expanded to include elementals and monstrosities, as long as they have a swim speed. Having to breathe water, i.e. having the amphibious or water breathing feature, is no longer a requirement. Last but not least is the Yuan-Ti. Big changes, and as many would expect, mostly nerfs. To start on a happy note, they can now be small, and their spells scale with whatever mental stat you want. The infamous magic resistance is nerfed to only work on spells. Poison damage immunity, now reduced to poison resistance. Poison to condition immunity, now nerfed to the still respectable advantage on saving throws against the poisoned condition. They also lose a language down from 3 to 2, as well as the end of their name, no longer called Purebloods, which was sort of in bad taste without the context of their hierarchy. There are many notable omissions in their flavor text, cutting out huge paragraphs like one talking about their tendency towards slavery and devaluing human life. As with the orcs, a big motive of their revision was to allow Yuan-Ti of all alignments, rather than a static evil. In regards to role-playing as a Yuan-Ti, just like the Shadar-Kai, the section that includes their inability to empathize with basic emotions is entirely gone, which was always a bit of a hurdle in playing this race. Again, some people welcome the challenge in role-playing something like that, but WotC deemed it inessential in the grand scheme of setting agnostic stat blocks. And would you believe it, that's all of them. Another reminder that you are welcome to incorporate these into your game, or exclude them entirely, or allow your own custom blend of printed material at your home tables. Looking towards the future, these new design philosophies admittedly make it very easy to drop any of these races into any setting, into any sourcebook, and allow the setting-specific backgrounds to further define what role they can play. I totally get that that's not for everyone, but to put it plainly, this is what D&D 5e will look like moving forward. I can pretty much guarantee it. Overall, I like most of the changes. Many underpowered options will now have more time in the limelight, and many grossly powerful or incongruous features have been pulled back, and many wordings have been standardized and cleaned up for overall clarity. What more do you think we'll see now that WotC will have 10 years of hindsight with 5e? And how will all the other races not in this book eventually hash out? Only one way to find out. Thanks as always for your time. Like, subscribe, yada yada. May your ancestries always be evolving. Your multiverses always monstrous. And above all, stay frosty.